dynamic, and we're starting to see that play out now where their wide receivers just can't get separation. And we had higher hopes for the Giants. They just are underachieving once again. Now they have problems, and you mentioned it, so let's talk about that story because that was the big news coming into Sunday. Odell Beckham Jr. sits down for an interview with ESPN, basically criticizes the play calling, so that's head coach Pat Shurmur's department, and he also criticized Eli Manning, it seems, taking some shots at the Giants' offense and the lack of energy on this team. And the Giants came out. They certainly looked better on Sunday. Odell had a big game, so he was, of course, happy, even though they lost, seemingly, that he wasn't going to back down from his comments. But interesting what happened on Sunday on the sideline in Sterling Shepard basically acted like Odell Beckham, throwing a tantrum on the sideline, and Odell was actually the one that was trying to calm him down. We talked about this last year when the contract situation came up with Beckham. What do the Giants do? Do they pay this guy? Do they try to get rid of him? He's got some issues both on the sideline, not really off the field in terms of criminal, but just that he seems to be a guy that's more interested in being an entertainer and more interested in himself than he is being a part of a football team. But the Giants went out, gave him $65 million guaranteed. They made him the highest paid wide receiver in NFL history. Based on his comments, Eric, this past week where he talked about, asked if he was happy in New York and started talking about L.A. and how he likes sunshine, do you think that the Giants regret giving him this contract or that they knew what they were signing up for when they signed him to this deal?
Did you and I not sit here 6 or 7 weeks ago and say that this contract would be regretted? Maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but at some point in this deal, this contract would be regretted. I think what you will find with Odell Beckham Jr. is that he always will stir the pot. Yeah, he might be on the sideline calming down to Sterling Shepard right now, but he's stirring the pot in other ways. It's about making the story about himself, whether it's through a touchdown celebration, whether it's through an on-field spat with a cornerback, whether it's antics on the sideline, whether it's an interview he gives, whether it's being on a boat somewhere when you're, who knows with Odell Beckham Jr., right? Could even be eating pizza and sniffing a white powder substance with hookers out of a hotel room. You just never know with Odell Beckham Jr. Now, the thing about Sterling Shepard and possibly what you'll find in the future, who knows, with Evan Ingram and Saquon Barkley, and you've got these young players who are very good. I think they have a talented roster at the skill positions other than Eli Manning, and there's going to be this feeling there that we're young, we're superstars, we're paid a lot of money, we should win. Now you've got Eli Manning there who's got 1 foot out the door, maybe not by choice, but either way, it's definitely 1 foot out the door, and a head coach that seems at this point fairly incompetent. As you like to say, you light the fuse and you just wait for that kindling to start burning and the powder keg just blows at some point. This week, Sterling Shepard, next week, who knows, Saquon, next week, Odell. These players, they're not going to like losing. This could be an interesting season for the Giants.
Apparently, the Maras and Mr. Tisch, they don't listen to the Talkback podcast, which is unfortunate because we could have saved them a whole lot of money and a whole lot of heartache because this was the easiest thing ever to see that paying him was only going to make him worse. It's like when you have a child. You're out in public and they're throwing a fit and you reward them with something to get them to calm down. You cannot reward piss poor behavior. And that's exactly what the Giants did with Odell. They got painted in a corner. They're in that New York market space where if they trade him, they're going to hear about it. The media is going to kill them, but that would have been the move. That would have been the play. Go out and just try to get a first-round pick for him or something where you could have gotten yourself another wide receiver that maybe doesn't have the talent of Odell, but isn't the pain in the ass that Odell is. And that's all he is for this football team. Eric, he doesn't care about winning. He cares about his numbers. This guy became famous from a catch in a game that they lost, and it was a tremendous catch. But ever since then, that's all that he wants to be. If he gets his numbers, he's going to be happy. He wasn't in the locker room complaining. He was talking about how the team fought and this and that. You still lost, and you lost on a 63-yard field goal. You guys still lost that game, and you're 1-4, and you're talking about how you're not going to back down from your comments and this and that. Odell is about Odell, and he's maybe not different than many of the wide receivers in the NFL, but this is on the Giants. They knew what they were getting into. They've had years with this guy. They've never won anything with him. They had one opportunity to go to the playoffs, and Odell didn't even take that seriously. That right there should have been the red flag that this guy doesn't take the game serious enough to pay him $65 million. He's not a guy like a DeAndre Hopkins that just can play in a system Doesn't care who the quarterback is. He's just going to go out and produce. Everything seems to have to go the way for Odell, or he throws these little tantrums. And now you're starting to see other people say, okay, well, Odell can do it and get paid. I'm going to throw a tantrum too when I don't get the ball. It's a bad situation in New York, and we're only 5 games into this new contract. I don't see how he finishes his career in New York. I see at some point down the line, probably not this year, but in the future, I just don't see this working. I see them moving him out of town at some point and going in a different direction. And maybe they should have gone in a different direction in the draft, because we saw 4 quarterbacks go high in this 2018 draft. And surprisingly, all 4 of the rookie quarterbacks who started in week 5 all got wins. I know you were locked in on Sam Darnold, as was I, with them playing Denver. But which of these rookie quarterbacks impressed you the most in their win on Sunday?
When I saw your show notes, I actually thought this was maybe one of the best questions of the week. And that's not because the other ones were bad, but because this one required me to really dig in and think a little bit, because the homer in me would want to say Sam Darnold. But there's other factors in play here. I think the most impressive win, and this might surprise you because it was a 12-9 game, the most impressive win might be Baker Mayfield. Because if you look at the team stats, if you don't look at only the quarterback stats, if you look at the team stats, the Ravens and the Browns were basically dead even in almost every single category, up to and including time of possession, first downs. It's crazy how close these two teams were. And it was a 9-9 football game. So the fact that this game is on the shoulders of a young quarterback in overtime, trying to do what you can to win the game, the fact that he doesn't lose the game for you, I think is a big moment. Now, it wasn't a bomb touchdown pass or, an amazing touchdown run or anything like that that sealed the deal, but it was the fact that you didn't go out and lose the game. We've talked about that with the Jags, Blake Bortles, and teams that, you have a reliance on a certain star, and you love what they can do when they're hot, but you really, really pray that they don't do anything stupid. Baker Mayfield didn't really do anything stupid, and he didn't lose the game for the Browns. So, huge win for the Browns. So, when you're looking at the other 3, I think the second best performance has to go to Darnold, even though that game was mostly controlled by the run. Darnold had 3 touchdown passes. He had a good amount of yards. But the big story of that game was how the Jets controlled the run, the big performance out of Crowell. So, that win didn't really fall all the way on Sam Darnold, but he managed the game quite well. Rosen did okay. I wasn't terribly impressed with his stats. And you got to figure, if C.J. Beathard doesn't have 2 fumbles lost and 2 interceptions, 4 turnovers from a quarterback is enormous. And so I think the 49ers' fate in that game against the Cardinals is probably slightly different, even outside of anything that Josh Rosen did. And then finally, I can't give the nod to Josh Allen, even though the Bills ended up winning by 1 over the Titans, because the Titans are just impossible to figure out right now. They win games that you don't think they're going to win. They lose games against Buffalo that they are heavily favored in. It just doesn't make any sense. You lose a game to Josh Allen, who had like 82 passing yards. I mean, come on, 82 passing yards in the NFL? I can't give the nod to him. So, for those reasons, I like Baker Mayfield for the fact that he didn't lose the game for the Browns. He kept it under control. Darnold was a game manager, and Rosen, okay. Josh Allen, not even close.
Yeah, I thought you might go Darnold when I was writing this question, because I was leaning more towards.
I didn't want to piss you off.
I'm over that at this point. I told you last week after the Broncos game that they were in big trouble, but I just thought Baker Mayfield in that game versus a Ravens defense that we saw go into Pittsburgh and play so well, that grinded out type of game that he just kept going, over 300 yards passing, really had the one mistake earlier in the game with the interception, but just kept them in it, kept fighting, and it was kind of a grinded out divisional win. And I thought he was very impressive in what he's done, and really what he's done every time he's been under center for Cleveland. And you start to look at this team like, man, if they would have made the change earlier, where would their record be at this point?
They would have beat Pittsburgh.
Because you start to think, you think they would have or wouldn't have?
They would have beat Pittsburgh. If they pulled Tyrod out earlier and put Baker in, they would have beat Pittsburgh, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. I think the Saints game was a winnable game, and the NFL has already come out and said that the Derek Carr play where he fumbled and the Browns scooped it up and were heading for a pick 6 and it got blown dead should have been kept as a live ball. So they made a mistake there. That would have been another win for him. So I think what Mayfield has done changing the Cleveland Browns out. I mean, even when you start thinking about picking games, it used to be the last couple of years, whoever Cleveland was playing, that was the easiest game to pick. Now you look at them, even a game like they have in week 6 with the Chargers coming into Cleveland, you start to go, wow, the Chargers are a good team, but Cleveland, they can play these close, tough, tight games, and Baker can keep them in it. So they're just culturally, they're a different place now. That fan base has to be very excited from what they've seen. And even as a Jets fan, what Darnold did after he's sort of struggled for a few weeks, even though the run game was working for them and they had over 300 yards on the ground, he still made a couple of deep throws that he just dropped the dime in to Robbie Anderson over. And I don't know what Bradley Roby, he's still running around the Meadowlands in MetLife there. I'm trying to figure out where Robbie Anderson is, but I thought those throws were very impressive where he just put the game out of reach and he just broke the Broncos' spirit. So he gets my second nod. At Buffalo, I mean, you talk about a team that just scrapping and clawing for wins. That's a rough team to watch, but they've beat the Vikings and they've beaten the Titans, so they have to be pretty happy with what they saw in the preseason from Josh Allen, that it looked like, oh, man, do we have to go with a Nathan Peterman or an A.J. McCarron? And they've kind of thrown Josh Allen to the wolves, and he's got him a couple wins. But for me, the most impressive was Baker Mayfield.
So I got to ask you, because, of course, I was really hard on Baker Mayfield in the season preview, and I didn't want him on the Jets. Okay, we all know that. Listeners know that. But I think where he ended up, where Darnold ended up, is sort of the perfect scenario for all the reasons that we've already named. I'm all in on Sam Darnold for the Jets. I think he's a great long-term option. But I also think Baker Mayfield is like the perfect fit in Cleveland. He's exactly what they needed because he's so much better than any of the quarterbacks that they've drafted lately. And look, I don't root against the guy. I didn't want him on the Jets, but if he has no off-the-field issues and he comes in and he's scrappy and he wins for the Browns, I have no issues with that because I don't root for any of the other teams in the AFC North. So if the Browns are successful, that's good for football in a lot of ways. So, Justin, I want to just really quickly ask you, do you find yourself actually looking at the Browns games and going, man, I kind of hope that they win? Because they've been in every game this year. And just like you mentioned, they really could have won several of those, but they've literally been in every one of those games.
Well, I think you have to look at them, what they've been through. Even as a Broncos fan, after Super Bowl 50 and the way this team has struggled post Peyton Manning, you just kind of start to feel like even earlier in the season when you're losing, it's just like it's tough to go through the rest of the year with this mentality of like, oh, my God, we're probably going to be an underdog in nearly every game we play. We're that bad. Browns fans have dealt with that for just years and years and years. Generationally, they've just not been a good team, this whole mess with the quarterback position. So I agree. I think Mayfield, his personality, what he brings to the table is what this franchise needed. You see, Darnold is more of just kind of a quiet guy, just kind of goes unassuming, goes about his business, working with McCown. I think that's the perfect situation for him. I think the Browns needed a guy like Mayfield, a guy that just comes in, he brings energy, he can recharge that fan base. Cleveland is probably a better place for him. He's not in that spotlight of New York and that market there, the media capital of the world. He's kind of tucked away in Cleveland, but he's putting them back on the map. So I think just as in doing the show and from a content and what you see, yeah, it's great to actually see the Browns. I mean, Hugh Jackson, he's got 2.5 times more wins this year than he did last year. I'm surprised the Browns haven't signed him to a 5-year contract extension. Well, let's talk about a team that may be in the head coaching market very soon because their owner was none too pleased with a coaching decision that took place on Sunday night. We had this same situation last week with the Indianapolis Colts, where they went for it in overtime on 4th and 5 in their own territory. They did not convert, and they took the L in overtime. The Dallas Cowboys had a similar situation, except instead of 4th and 5, they had a 4th and 1 in their own territory. Dallas actually has a conversion rate that is 18 of 19 on 4th and 1 since 2016 when basically Dak Prescott and Zeke Elliott got to town. So they've been very good at converting. But on that particular play, the play before that on 3rd and 1, Zeke got stuffed. So it was about actually 4th and 1.5 yards. Jason Garrett chose to punt. And we know what happened. DeAndre Hopkins put the Cowboys secondary in the spin cycle. He got all the way down deep into Dallas territory and set him up for the game-winning field goal. And Jerry Jones was not very happy, saying the team needs to take risks at that point. Obviously, he gets hindsight 2020, but when you saw it happen live, knowing what the Colts did the week before Did you think it was a good move to punt the ball for Dallas?
No, I'm actually, maybe for the first time in my life, going to agree with Jerry Jones